very interesting topic I'm going to be covering today, and it has to do with the role of China, not only on the international stage and global affairs, but mainly has to do with the Arab-Israeli conflict, because it's a very, very complicated. And in this live stream, what I wanted to do, guys, is provide you my own insights as to where I see the limitations, where I see the possibilities, but also provide you the whole understanding about this Arab-Israeli conflict is so complicated in its nature. And this is why I'm going to be asking a few questions to have you part of the conversation, of course, and we just go from there. I will answer a question or two towards the end, like I always do. Before I do this, please, guys, make sure to subscribe if this is your first time in this channel. I also like to extend my sincere thanks to all channel supporters, members, subscribers, and everyone in between. But I'd like to give a shout out quickly here to two new supporters by the name to channel, that is Roger Hamid. Thank you very much for becoming a channel supporter. Truly appreciate it. Second person is V. Olafs to there. My apologies if I mispronounced the last name here. So thank you for becoming a channel supporter. Also, I want to give a shout out to Joy Choi, who rejoined the channel as a member. Thank you for being here. And the last person I want to give a shout out to, who bought me coffee this morning, is Zhu Liang. Thank you so much, an avid supporter of the channel. Thank you all. So, all right, let's start with the key questions, guys, here, because those are questions are worth asking. And of course, type in where you're joining me from here, please. So the key question we need to ask, and there are a lot, but I'm going to focus on 3 or 4. So the first question we're going to start with is, how does, and this is a question just for us to think, how does the Arab world, let's say Arab / Muslim world, see China when it comes to global affairs? In other words, how do they assess the role of China on the global stage? Okay. Second question is, will the Arab world, the Arab Muslim world, trust China? Because I know the answer could be easily, well, yeah, of course, Dr. L, but it's beside the point. We still need to ask the question. And you will understand why as I move forward. Third question is, given the complexities of the Arab-Israeli conflict, when I say Arab-Israeli, I'm referring to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Is it worth for China to get involved? Because when you get involved, you're going to have to allocate resources, you're going to have finances, economics, energy, credibility. There's a lot involved. And this is just a legitimate question to ask. And the last question is, what's in it for China? Now, China is not going to do it just because they feel like it. There's no such thing in international relations. When it comes down to global affairs, geopolitics, everything in between, there is something called national interests. Yeah. Even for those who say, well, it's the same arguments that India is making. Yes, I understand that, and I am not against it. I understand that arguments. Where it is challenging is when you are intentionally embarking on an opposite position to undermine an entity. That's the different case for China. So, all right off the bat, and I'm going to share with you, by the way, a brief history, snapshots of China relations with Israel, China relations with Palestine. I'm going to share both of you. But there is something very interesting, and I'm going to share the screen with you. When I was looking into some information as far as really about the depth, a deep look, if I may use the term, into the China-Palestine strategic partnership. And guess what happened, guys? That website doesn't exist anymore. I'm going to share it with you as is, as I opened it. Look at this one. Look what it says. Right there. Forbidden. And by the way, and I'm going to share the link with you. You can take a look at it later on yourself. And the reason why I wanted to do this, let me stop sharing. Yeah, here we go. Why I wanted to do this, guys, is because I want you to understand. By the way, this article was only written on June 18th of this year. So it's recent. Apparently, China and Palestine have agreed to some sort of significant developments. And this one has reached, between two of them, China and Palestine, reached an agreement to establish a strategic partnership. Now you can even find this information here. So, and by the way, this agreement was made during a meeting between Chinese President Xi and the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas when the latter visited China a few months ago. Now there is none of that. So why am I saying this to you guys? I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we discuss the possibility of China entering into this Arab-Israeli conflict, so forth. Now, there is another fascinating thing which I will share with you here. Yesterday came to my attention about an article I wrote a few years ago. Okay, and I'm gonna show you the link here, and I will post it for you. And here is the link. I'm gonna share it with you on the screen. Why not? Let me stop this one here, and I will post it for you guys later. And this I wrote back in 2021. You guys can read what it says on the title. That was 2021. Why am I saying this? It's to me back then, as an analyst, as I always say, you have to look for the trends. And if you read the article, you'll realize what I'm referring to here is the idea of the possibilities that China will be perceived as an honest broker when it comes down to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Mind you, I did mention towards the end, there was a short article, very short. I did mention that the possibilities of this efforts being undermined by the United States are there. So I just wanted to share this with you because it just came to I forgot that I wrote it back then. But so that's what I wanted to share with you. All right, let's get into our conversation about. There were a few articles written about this particular topic, and I'm going to highlight one particular one from the Guardians, which I can just see how the narrative, it's almost meant to be the same argument that was made about Indonesia. You all remember back then when I told you some authors from the National University in Australia were pushing the narrative to create that fear inside Indonesia that it's going to side with China, do you need to side with the US, whatever. The intention of the author of that particular article was nothing but a lie to create doubt inside Indonesia. Same arguments I found with this article from the Guardians, and I'm going to share with you about all this. There are those who have been arguing that, well, why China all of a sudden calling for urgent actions on Gaza? You know, as the Muslim majority countries, sort of the representatives arrived to Beijing. Remember, it was only a week ago. Some representatives of the Arab League, I believe, went over to Beijing. They had a warm welcome, but also a reflection of how China sees that. So, and this is where China argued at that time that its top diplomat stated that during the meeting with the officials from the Arab and Muslim majority nations, that Beijing steps up its effort to play a constructive role in establishing a permanent ceasefire. At that time, that's what they were calling for. So of course, the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi welcomed at that time his counterparts from Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Palestine National Authority, and Indonesia, as well as the head of the OIC. It's known as OIC, Organization of the Islamic Cooperation. And this is when they spent 2 days in Beijing dealing with this matter. So what was said, what Mr. Wang Yi said, and I quote here, the international community, you know, here's what's interesting about this. He didn't say China must act. He says the international community must act urgently, taking effective measures to prevent this tragedy from spreading. China firmly stands with justice and fairness in this conflict. End of quote. It's very, very interesting. Once again, Mr. Wang Yi, who's been, around for a long time, to understand how the dynamics were. Like him, for me personally, as an international observer, as an analyst, I put, pardon me, I put the two, Mr. Wang Yi and Mr. Lavrov, at the same level. As far as their depth when it comes down to understanding international affairs. So their statements, the words tends to be very measured, and that's for a reason. So, and this is why, if you see the response, and the reason I want to give you sort of an understanding first before we get into the analysis itself, because you have to understand what took place in Beijing last week. Of course, Western media was limited in its coverage on all this. And this is something I am thinking about down the road. Might end up having to do is travel around the world and report directly from on the ground, whatever parts of the world I will be. So I'm just thinking about it now. I will let you know as I move forward into this. But here is what interesting about it is that the visiting ministers, the foreign ministers are from Saudi Arabia, for example, Prince Faisal bin Farhan. What he said, his statements also was measured. He said, and I quote, "The message is clear. The war must stop immediately. We must move to a ceasefire immediately, and relief materials and aid must enter immediately." End of quote. Well, you can just see sometimes it's nothing but a word, verbiage, just a wording, just words, no actions. Make no mistake, we all know the reality of it. Saudis tends to talk too much. The Turks tend to talk too much. Even Iranian to a degree. Most of the Arab world for that matter. And I don't shy away from saying it. Knowing what I know, as one who understands the culture, especially in the Middle East. Now, and let me put this on the record. I am not advocating for military conflicts here. That's not what I'm advocating for. Peace is the best for all parties involved. But at the same time, it comes time in your life, be it a government, a country, an individual, whatever, where you're going to have to act instead of just talk. Watch what a man does, not what he says. You all remember, right? So, but here is where I say the importance of understanding the history of China when it comes down to its relations with both. So I'm going to start with the China-Israel relations first, and I'm not going to go into too much of it. I'll mention just a brief aspects of it that you need to know. So let's go back to 1930s. What happened in 1930s? That was when David Ben Gurion said at that time, back then, he said that China will be one of the great world powers in the future or of the future. That's the same arguments. I think the foreign minister, if I'm not mistaken, of France, when he said, and I paraphrase here, "Watch out when the giants awake from its sleep," in reference to China. That was back then. So, though David Ben Gurion was persistent, or prescient rather, could not win over the Chinese, even though with his statements, he couldn't win over the Chinese during its early years. No. And in 1947, 47 exactly, China abstained on the vote for the partition. This is where Palestine was partition. Remember what the Brits did, and later expressed support for the Palestinians. This is what Chinese back then. It was till into 1980s when China refused to grant visas to Israelis unless they held dual citizenship and carried the passports of a country other than Israel. That was back then. So, of course, you have to also take into consideration other historical events, like, for example, the Sino-Soviet split that took place, and also China's 1979 establishment of diplomatic relations with the United States. During that time, of course, things had to change. Israel and China began to secretly, yes, it was secretly, build military ties. Both countries supplied weapons, of course, at that time to Afghanistan. We all know why, right? So, fast forward to 1987, Prime Minister Shimon Peres, at that time, appoints Amos Yudan to set up the first official government-owned company to establish sort of commercial activities between China and Israel. There was one particular aspect of it. It has to do with the capital of Israel. Of course, as you know, it has moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Well, China didn't go with that. So prior to the establishment of the full diplomatic relations, Israel and China established representatives' offices in Beijing and in Tel Aviv. That's what it was. That's what it functions as a de facto embassies. There wasn't an embassy as you and I know it. That's when the diplomatic relations are officially established, because it was nothing of that. So they had like what we call the liaison office, and sort of what we have now with some other countries, like, for example, even with Iran or there are some liaisons office. That's some other third party country gets involved in mediating between the two countries. So the diplomatic relations between Israel and China sort of were established in January 1992, just for you to know. So the history doesn't go by. So, and ever since, they have developed sort of their relationship, culminating to the historic visit of the Chinese president, Jiang Zemin. I don't remember the visit. It was in 2000 when he visited Israel. So, 4 Israeli presidents and 3 prime ministers, including the most recent one, Netanyahu, visited China in March 2017. And that's how the part of the relationship between, it's long. I'm not going to get into a lot of details of it. Suffice it to say that as of this time of this discussion here, China has economic investments in Israel. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't mean China will not stand for what's right, because this is about doing what's right. Regardless, that's like your cousin. He's your cousin, but when he does something wrong, you ain't gonna shy away from letting him or her know that, hey man, or hey man, you made a mistake here and you need to own up to it. Same arguments I'm making here, guys. And I just wanted to highlight this one to you. Now, on the other hand, there is, let me see here. There is also the idea of the Chinese China-Palestine relationship, because we can't just do the China-Israeli. You have to do the other side, both sides of the argument. And all this, what I do in this channel, guys, like you know it already, because we have built a community now. So we know at least how some of us think, and we kind of move together as a cohesive team, all of us in one direction. It's to sort of awareness and create awareness and understand, have a better understanding. So the China-Palestine relations, also referred as to Sino-Palestinian relations, sort of encompasses like a long bilateral relations between the two, China and Palestine. And that one dates back way before the early years of the Cold War. Yeah, that's how far back. So I can tell you from a historical record, and this is based on the historical record that I had to go spend time and research to ensure its accuracy. To me, so far, it is accurate. I check always. The first thing I do when I want to check something, I'll check the reference. That's what I do with my books. I got to make sure there is enough reference for people when they open up my books. The first thing they're going to look at is the page of the references, because that will always give you an indication how well is the book is researched. Well, same thing here. I had to go and ensure the accuracy of the references. So here's the thing. During the era of Mao Zedong, China's foreign policy back then, how was it? Because back then, what we used to call developing nations, we used to call them third world. You don't use that term anymore. we use the term develop. There's developing and there's developed. Developed are, US, Britain, China, and so forth. Developing is the concept of the third world, but we don't use that term anymore. Well, back then, that's how it still stays on the record. So the Chinese foreign policy was in support of the third world national liberation movements across the world. That was its foreign policy. And this is where China extended its support towards the Palestinian Liberation Organization known as PLO, still till today. So during this period, what happened is that there were many groups inside Israel. Inside Palestine, like Fatah, for example. To those who understand Arabic and know about Palestine, you will know what I'm referring to here. Fatah was a small organization inside. And China was supporting all those because they were within the Palestine entity. There was also what they called back then the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. So now, fast forward to the post-Mao Zedong era. What happened historically? China continues its support for the PLO in international forums. This is what I'm saying. You have to understand this historical background for you to come to understand whether China will be able to broker a lasting peace between Israel and Palestine. And in the as I said, in the post-Mao Zedong's era, China continued to support for PLO in international forums, though it dropped its support for those organizations. Because you can be, now who's who? You're going to have the face of an entity. Because if you have too many cooks in the kitchen, that's a problem. You only have to have one chef in the kitchen per se. So that's what China did. However, China recognized the state of Palestine since 1988. That's how far back it goes. And since 1992, China also established formal, that's a key word, something didn't happen before with Israel back then, formal diplomatic relations with Israel at the time. That was during the same time. So, and has maintained a cordial relationship with both entities. So, and as you know, the late Arafat, who was the head of the PLO, and the current one, Mahmoud Abbas, both of them have visited Beijing on an official capacity. So it's, I wanted to share this with you to put it in perspective because you need to understand it. So now, here is where we're going to enter into the idea of can China or will China be able to broker a deal? And like I said earlier, China has been a supporter. It's no secret. And it's so funny how some Western media makes it sound like this is a bad thing, very bad thing. And I'm going to share something with you. This is why I have to dig through the information. I spend time looking into all this to make sure, because I have to provide you both sides of the argument. So you'll see what's being written and said. And when authors come up and share articles, whatever, you have to understand the wording of that. This is, I still could not forget how, what's the word? It was by design, that article about Indonesia back then from the Australian National University. It was specifically to create that division inside Indonesia, which was far from the truth. The author basically was a lie. That's basically what it was. Same thing, the arguments can be made here. So China has maintained the support with the Palestinian statehood, as I mentioned, since 1988. And with the Palestinian Declaration of Independence. This is why you see in some countries like Spain mentioned, well, maybe time we need to come forward and declare the independence of the Palestinians. And like I mentioned, China has also established official diplomatic ties with Israel in 1992. So to put all this within the context of the recent meeting that took place in Beijing, as far as the representatives of the Arab world, the Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, I think, those countries, the Gulf state, Qatar also, it's to understand whether the Arab countries, because those are key players in the Arab politics to a degree. They don't influence it, but they can play a role in it. Whether they are already leaning towards wanting China to play a far bigger role than the US. This is the idea of all this. So, because there are those, and again, interesting enough how the Western media is manipulating the wording. I'm going to share a sentence with you and provide you my own insight. Here's a sentence. And this, by the way, was from an article written by, let me see, who wrote this? Written by Simon McCarthy and Wayne Chung. And this was the way it appeared on CNN. So, and we all know what CNN is, right? You're not going to trust that one unless you trust them at your own peril. So here's the thing, what it says, and I quote here: Beijing has been at odds with Washington, an Israeli ally and long major power broker in the region. End of quote. So you all see the problem with this, right? What is the problem with this sentence, guys? Can anybody tell me? Where do you see the problem with this wording? I'm going to repeat it. Beijing has been at odds with Washington, an Israeli ally, and a long major power broker in the region. So I'd like to have your input. And once again, we are a community here. We're exchanging ideas. That's the whole purpose of this. And I know some are trying to silence this channel here. I'm noticing they try and suppress the channel. So your support is what keep it going. And I count on you guys to share those videos with others. This is why I always say, please make sure to hit the like button, because the algorithm can't do a damn thing about it if the video gets spread all over the world. So, but they are trying to suppress the channel, by the way. So let me see what you guys put in on this one here. Oh, I see Muslim revert. Oh, thank you so much, sir, for your support. Truly appreciate it. We all appreciate your analysis of geopolitics, Dr. O. And I like the way how you show your appreciation for stickers, super chats, and coffee. Of course. And I will not trade it for anything else. And then to those who argue that I take time to do this, well, I'm sorry. If you can't show gratitude, then what are you standing for? You can't just take, you're going to have to give, because I'm going to pay it forward in some fashion. That's how it works. You can't be just a taker in life. You have to also be a giver, and I appreciate it. I have to say thank you. And I will do it no matter what the cost is. So I appreciate you for that. So let me see what you guys put down for what I mentioned about that statement. And I know that it's a little tricky, but I just wanted to get you part of the conversation. That's all, no more, no less. And I know there's a delay here. It's always been that way. So yeah, it sometimes doesn't show up here. So anyway, I'm gonna move on, guys, because I've always been consistent. Yeah. Let me just, I don't want to give up on this because I want to see. We are all with you. Oh, Army with Harmony. Thank you so much, man, for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. Truly appreciate it. So, oh, here's Alan Sin. Thank you very much, man. Truly appreciate it. My fellow Canadian, my neighbor to the north. So thank you so much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. So let me keep going with what I was talking about, that sentence. Beijing has been at odds with Washington, an Israeli ally, and a long major power broker in the region. Well, here is what's wrong with this sentence. First of all, it's not China that is at odds with the Washington. It's the other way around. It's because Washington couldn't compete. This is why we are doing what we're doing, to undermine the progress of China, because we couldn't compete. That's straightforward. Second thing, an Israeli ally and long major power broker in the region. Well, did the authors of this article added the word not an honest broker? not an honest one, because he was never honest. The role of the United States when it comes down to the Arab-Israeli conflict. It pains me to say this about my own country. I'm sad when I say this because it's my country, guys. I'm sure you do understand. But I can't shy away from saying the truth. We have never played an honest broker into finding a permanent solution to this. And this is where China comes in, and why the Muslim Arab world are leaning more towards China, because they are seeing what China sort of doesn't favor one over the other. And we saw what it has achieved between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So why not trust China to really take on the Arab-Israeli conflict? And this is where, and because what the media says, this is why you have to be very careful when reading articles, how it's worded. So when you talk about criticizing, this is based on this article that's saying criticize Beijing is at odds with Washington and an approach to the conflict, including when it comes to the immediate ceasefire. Well, of course, we didn't support that. China did. So China didn't refrain from criticizing Israel. But the arguments also said about the article said, well, wait a minute. China didn't condemn the Hamas group in its statements. Well, because they saw where the reality of the conflict is. It's no different than what it was the case in Ukraine. And we in Washington wants China to state publicly that it condemned Russia, it condemned whatever other group. No, China ain't gonna do that, because to them it's not the right way. And I hope if it is the case, China will move forward and state that. But for now, it doesn't see it that way. No. And here is the thing. I'm continuing with this article because it's tied to what we are talking about. China has been attempting to play an active role in finding a solution to the conflict as it seeks to expand its position as a major global power. Once again, it's misleading. China does not need the conflict to confirm its role as a major global power. That's misleading to me. And second thing, China has never been attempting. They didn't never attempt. They're either going to embark on taking on that conflict or not. The same thing they did with Iran and Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, guys, did you know that those talks been 40 years? It's not a month or 2 or 3, 40 years before it was achieved. And this is what I see happening with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict if China decides to get involved. My instinct is telling me it's going to be, China will be undermined, because how can you even trust the Israelis themselves being part of the party, or being part of the negotiations? I just don't see. I don't see it. So, but again, China will have to make that decision moving forward. The other part of this argument from this article says the conflict has also given China an opportunity to bolster its already strengthening ties with several countries across the Arab world, a region where observers say meaning China, hopes to drive a wedge between the US and the countries with which it has long-standing ties. Once again, as an analyst, you learn over, practice and years of learning how to read between the lines. What I read between the lines is nothing but a lie. China is not driving a wedge between the US and its ally. I mean, look, did China told the Saudis, well, wait a minute, how about if you do our yuan and drop the petrodollar? They never told the Saudis that. Saudis took that initiative on their own. So when an article said like the conflict, the Israeli Hamas Palestinian conflict, that is, has also given China an opportunity to bolster its already strengthening. Well, China has already been increasing its footprints in the Middle East way back. When I used to go back then, I've seen the signs of that. And I've been arguing at that time, it's just a matter of time before you see a pivot of the countries from the Middle East towards Asia. I've been arguing that for years. Nobody heard me back in Washington. And that's an example of this article that I shared with you as far as seeing China broker the Arab-Israeli conflict as an honest broker for them. And that's why I use the term honest specifically. So when you hear authors coming up with this, remember, this is for domestic consumption to push the narrative. So now, here is what Mr. Wang Yi told that delegation when they visited Beijing last week. This is quote, "We have always firmly defended the legitimate rights and interests of Arab and Muslim countries and have always firmly supported the Palestinian people's effort to restore their legitimate national rights and interests." End of quote. It's straightforward. There is no ifs and buts. And this is where, even when you hear our incompetent president, Mr. Biden, saying, "Oh, made it clear to see that the presidency that he, meaning Biden, view Hamas as separate from Palestinians." No, it is an integral part of the Palestinian society, whether we like it or not. This is the reality that some Western entities never wanted to accept and admit, including the EU, which EU is busted anyway. So this is how, and this is why usually the US will put certain organizations on the terrorism watch list or as terrorist organizations and so forth. Well, let me share something with you historically to prove how wrong this was. When we put back then the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and again, as one who very familiar with the Middle East and so on, back then, way back, like in 2014, somewhere around that time, we put them on the terrorism watch list. And then when the elections came up in Egypt, guess who won the elections? You all remember him, right? Mohamed Morsi won the elections, which means what? It was the will of the people. We didn't like the outcome. So where is democracy? Where is the freedom of the vote? So if we are to say, well, we stand for democracy, isn't that will be part of it? How come we didn't accept the outcome of that? Because it didn't serve our own interests. So what happened is we gave the green light to the head of the military at that time, Sisi, the current president, to take over in a coup. We allowed it. We approved it. The Saudis approved it too. I was very familiar with the Saudi role into that because Saudis have always feared the brotherhood. But that's beside the point, is the idea of when you hear the wording of certain things. So for them to say, well, you're going to separate this group from the rest of society, it just doesn't work. This is why even Israel itself will not be able to defeat that. That's one of its main goals. That ain't going to happen. As a matter of fact, at the time of this, there are already attacks from Hezbollah on Israeli. Tel Aviv has been hit, by the way, based on some, and I am yet to confirm those informations. And people were fleeing. And we're not talking anything advanced yet. So, and this is where you're going to have to really be very careful how you read the aspects of the, and I look around, I search for the information before I'll share it with you. The same argument, what I just shared with you, the same was reflected in The Guardian. The whole British is, you all know how it is. And what did it start with? Rivalry with the US and a current anti-Semitism are running up against Beijing's increased closeness to Israel. You're misleading people. You misleading people. This is the truth of it. And you guys need to know. And it is my duty to share with you the truth. And that's all I can do. So, as I said again, it is no secret that China has been a supporter of the Palestinians since the Mao Zedong era. And a long call. China has long time called for the two-state solutions. Even though China has ties with Israel, economic ones. So what? You can have even military ties. So what? There's nothing wrong with that. It's the idea of what's right and what's wrong. This is where I see the Western media is manipulating, trying to overlap the information so it'll confuse the reader who might not even be very familiar with how geopolitics is, how the dynamics of the puzzle or the board, the chessboard, whatever term you want to call, are moving. So, and this is where when you read, for example, and I quote here, Beijing has been a supporter of the Palestinians since the Mao era and long called for the two-state solution, but it is increasingly close to Israel and is presenting itself as a neutral party that holds steadfast to a non-interference principle. End of quote. What are they doing here? They are creating doubt in your mind that, oh, by the way, China is increasingly close to Israel, but they're presenting itself as a neutral party. But they are presenting themselves as a neutral party. That's how they succeeded in brokering a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, because of the neutrality. That's the truth of it. And they're not willing to accept this reality. So, and they go on by saying Beijing is also trying to build on its minimal, listen to this, minimal but growing influence in the Middle East. What makes you think that is minimal? Go and ask in the Middle East. I've been there. I've been asking, what do you guys, how do you, I asked one time outside, an average person, wasn't an official from a government. I just asked, so let me ask you a question. Since I spoke the language and all that, we were drinking tea and I asked, I said, how do you see China here? Oh, well, they are building stuff for us here. That was the first word. First word. I didn't need to continue the conversation. So when you hear about minimal but growing, China's been growing its footsteps in the Middle East way back, not because of this conflict. And this is what they're trying to, when I say they, the authors and media and Western media and so forth, or established media that is, that's what they're trying to do. To instill this doubt in your thinking. And you guys are beyond this at this stage. You've watched me long enough. There are some of you who've been with me since day one. By now, I would not doubt your abilities in really deciphering and reading between the lines. Because that's how it's supposed to be. And it goes on to say where it has major economic interest and also presenting itself as a leader of a global South and furthering its anti-US agenda. Couldn't be far from the truth. What agenda are we talking about? And again, word matters. You know, I see this different than what China said than when India claimed to be the spokesperson for Global South. Well, I was like, hold on a second, India. When I say India, government that is. You know, you are not in a position to claim such leadership. When your own infrastructure is still in a disarray, when your poverty it's going on a rise, when your ethnic tensions are on the rise, when the Indian citizens have not prospered for the last 7 years since Modi took over. You know, how can you claim the Global South leadership? China never claimed the Global South leadership, unless I'm missing something, and I usually keep my eyes open on what's going on around the world. And once again, this is what I wanted to bring you, all this to understand the reality where it is, and we're going to put it within the context whether China will take on the Arab-Israeli conflict. And of course, this comes on the backdrop of China wrapping up its presidency at the UN Security Council. which I already posted something for you in the community. And by the way, it was one of 120 countries. Yeah, China was one of 120 countries that voted at the General Assembly for a ceasefire. Who objected it? The United States first. Germany abstained. I was surprised at Hungary. There were 14 countries. They rejected this, and 44 countries objected. Somewhere like that. So, and this is where I see they don't. It just to understand where the narrative always goes when it comes down to geopolitics. Because countries, like I said, there is something called strategic interest. Every country will have to think about that. It will become the question of how you manipulate the masses, the thinking that is, especially for average people. I mean, let's face it. If we are to say, you are in a different, and nothing against others who do not know, but you are in a different league, if I may use the term, for you to be paying, for you to come and sit here and watch, listen, and share the thoughts. That tells me something. You are not an average Joe, average Jane here. For you to be willing to spend an hour of your time to listen to this very dry information, but at the same time opening your mind on the truth of what's going on around the world, that says a lot. Majority are not in that position. So you don't compare yourself to an average. No, we are all average here. You all know what I mean by that. I'm talking intellectually here. And this is where something that you're going to now have to understand how to read this kind of reports, assessments, analysis, whatever you want to use the term. So to be smart about reading this one. Now, here's the thing about China, what they're saying about China now. And this is a quote from the managing director of the Asia Society Policy Institute. His name is Rory Daniels. What he said, and I quote, rhetorical support, that's a key word right there. Support for the Palestinians alongside most of the Arab and Muslim world is relatively cost-free to offer. And frankly, a fair slice of the Western world too is very concerned about the humanitarian crisis. End of quote. No. You're playing here with words. You're trying to show that China wants to take advantage of. Well, China doesn't want to take advantage because China will play an honest broker, where the United States failed all those years because it was never intentioned to find a lasting solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict, two-state solution. We solved it. And this is again, and here is the interesting thing, guys. Here is what I found very fascinating. What I shared with you earlier was from here in the US. What I'm sharing with you right now is from the UK. And both of them converge on one key theme. And the key theme, and I'm sharing it with you right here, quote, the conflict, Arab-Israeli conflict or Hamas-Israeli conflict. Conflict comes at a time when Beijing is seeking to grow its influence in the Middle East, a region where it has historically not had significant clout, by building its involvement in brokering a deal earlier this year to normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. End of quote. You can just see it's the same argument. They're trying to instill doubt in your mind that China is only riding the conflict instead of honestly wants to provide a lasting solution to it. Two different things. You're talking from two ends of the same spectrum. Because China, when it brokered the deal earlier this year in March between Iran and Saudi Arabia, it was not built on the Arab-Israeli conflict. It might be to a degree, but China had a long conversation over the years with both parties behind closed doors. That's what it worked. Now, there's some other analysts, some academia. This is why you need to understand the role of academia. Academia is part of the establishment. For us here in the US, and I don't shy away from it, and I'll say it, Harvard. Harvard is part of the establishment. Harvard is the back door of the government. If you notice who teaches there political science, geopolitics, international relations, and so forth, most of them were former government officials. Once they're done with the government, with every administration, the post is already, heck, what's her name? The former Prime Minister of New Zealand. She's been given a professorship position in Harvard. Is she even qualified to teach? Why? Because she was pushing the agenda of the West. That's my bottom line. And I intend, by the way, I'm going to establish a Rumble account. I will be talking in a Rumble. I can share more openly because I never trusted this. You all know how it is. So this professor by the name Alessio Patalano, professor of war and strategy in East Asia at King College in London. We all know, right? And he said, and I quote, there were signs Beijing was leaning on Iran to prevent further escalation of the conflict as a step towards a ceasefire. What a baloney. Well, couldn't say that it was the UK and the United States who objected the ceasefire to begin with. And he went on to say they are trying to use their acquired influence in the region to see if they can target a fragile and fast evolving situation in a way that allows them to claim, if a victory comes around, that they were part of the solution, not the problem. End of quote. That's to me troubling. That is the reverse of reality. It's complete reverse. China does not want it to claim, doesn't want to go for fame, doesn't want to go for status, for we did this, we did that. Look what they just accomplished with Iran and Saudi Arabia. Whoever thought? I didn't see this coming. I'll admit it. And I'll challenge whoever else said, oh, we saw this coming, China will do this. He was not on the deck. He was not. As many years I've spent in the Middle East, I didn't see it, I admit it. And yet, China succeeded. Did they brag about it? Nah. Moved on. And this is why, here is another guy from think tank. You're all familiar with the Rand Corporation in Washington, D.C. So said, and I quote, Beijing still didn't have strong enough influence in the deeply complex region to affect a real solution. Once again, if this guy was being honest, he could have at least mentioned that, well, at least China will be a neutral. A role we couldn't play for the last how many decades? So this is the reality of all this. But there is another aspect that I need to let you know about, and this one has to do with the idea of what's in it for China. Because to get involved, it goes just beyond just negotiations and talk and holding bilateral meetings and so forth. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. What I see coming in the conversation, and I read stuff from different entities around the world just to see what's the common denominator. What I see the common denominator among all in the academic setting, that is the word of a rivalry between China and US. That's what I see coming a lot. So it's almost, I feel like they wanted to drill that terminology into the mind of the people around the world. So that's because anytime you read something from a specific entities, it's always analysts will link China's response to its ongoing rivalry with China, not the other way around. They're reversing the roles. That's part of manipulation. Yeah. The U.S. is a major supporter of Israel. The U.S. voted against ceasefire. What does it tell you right there? Can an entity like this, it pains me to say it, it's my country, but can a country like that play an honest role? No, we can't. So where the challenge is going to be for China, if it decides to move forward, as I said, it's going to have to get involved 100%. Being involved 100%, to me at this stage, it doesn't strike me as pragmatic. And this is why I don't see China doing it right now. China will express its concerns, its voice on the international stage regarding this. But even if China to do this, I will assume they're going to have to depend on a very key players in the Middle East. There are 3 countries that they're going to have to depend on. Actually 4. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran. Which means what? For China to succeed, if I were advising the Chinese government, the way I will say it is, I'm going to approach it this way. You're going to have, first of all, to have those 4 countries ensure the full commitments on the Palestinian side, because you won't have any other side to talk to at the US or Israel, because that's the only 2. The EU is useless. The UK is useless. All of them. You have the US and Israel, and even Israel itself. It can't do anything on its own. Israel cannot survive on its own. It's not a laughing matter, but it's just the reality of it. If it's not for the US, it will be no issues there to begin with. But for the other side, because you're going to have to ensure that full commitment. And if you do that, because those countries do have an influence among certain groups inside. The second thing, you're going to have to ensure that there is unity within the Palestinian entity, all of them. Because as it stands today, the reason why you're seeing Hamas the way it is versus the West Bank is 2 separate. This is why Biden is pushing the narrative with C about ensuring that Hamas will have no role into Palestinian society. Palestinian people will not accept that. Despite what you hear, they are an integral part of their society. So, and this is one thing China will have to ensure, that there is one entity called Palestine, not the groups. They're going to have to figure that out. Arabs and the Arab culture, that is, the complications of the social ties, the ethnics, and so forth. It's very, very complicated. Heck, you got even some Western media still bringing the lies about the China's atrocities against Uyghurs, which we all know was a lie. And this is how they're justifying it for why, China cannot play a role into this. And this is why I am convinced, should China move forward into this, its efforts are going to be undermined. So Beijing needs to think twice. Because again, this is not about just holding bilateral talks. There is a lot of commitments involved into this. China has also other things to deal with. Like, for example, the story I'm working on right now, and it has to do with Bhutan, the border, and what's going on with India being the third element that is playing on behalf of the United States. There is also the conversation about the U.S. disclosed information about the plot or the attempt neutralization of a Sikh. I don't know. I'm looking into that, and I will report that to you. So this is where I see the major challenges for China moving forward, and it will not be an easy undertaking. And I bet Chinese strategists are thinking deeply about this. Iran and Saudi Arabia, one thing. Israel, Palestine, another thing. And I'm sure they are not putting together. No, this one has its own strategy. This one will have its own strategy. And the reason why China succeeded in the first one, but for now, is because those talks were held behind closed doors, secretly, was nothing known about it. Even though the US said, well, we were aware of the talks. No, you won't. No, you won't. So this is where I see things moving forward. And again, for now, I can't say anything conclusively because I haven't seen the big writing on the wall, as we say, regarding China taking on this, because it's a major undertaking. It will be nice to have an honest broker. It will be very nice, even if you move the needle a little bit towards fairness, justice, because he can have this unbalanced, because it is out of whack. And it is out of whack because we decided for it to be that way. But all this, especially from the Western side, signifies the beginning of the end of Western hegemony. We come into the last lap of our dominance of the global order system, that is, and a new one is in the making. Consider yourself lucky, guys, to be alive to witness this. I am, at least. I wasn't born in World War II to see that transition, so, but that's how it is. Oh, let me say thank you to Army with Harmony. Thank you very much for your super sticker. Truly appreciate your support, man. Truly appreciate it. Adam Singh, thank you so much again for your super sticker. Oh, Bon, here's Bon. Hi, Bon. I appreciate you, man. As always, Dito Muslim reverts. Comment, thanks. Yeah, thank you so much, Bon. Truly appreciate it. Bon, one of those, has been with me since day one on both channels, literally since day one. Truly appreciate it. It's a community, guys. It's that's all it is. And I am ensuring that we will always be in contact. That's why I'm going to go ahead and establish the other platform, because I just don't trust the system. I've been around long enough to know how it works. So that just because I will hit for you not to be getting the accurate information about or clear read about the geopolitical landscape, global one that is, because changes are coming down the pipe. They're already upon us here, but you're going to be seeing major ones in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, major ones. And I would like for you to be aware of those, because now you may think, well, I live here, whatever, it will impact you. It will impact you one way or another. But it's better when you are prepared, psychologically, even to understand. That's just the way I see it. That's the way I see it. Oh, I see a question right here from Hong Wan. A question, Dr. O, will the U.S. politicians sabotage peace deal between Palestine and Israel brokered by China? Oh, of course. They won't even let it take off the ground. You hear what the idiot, I call him idiot, Graham from South Carolina is saying. Should be no protection for the civilians. And he challenged the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State for saying we should avoid civilians. This is a U.S. senator. Why is he there to begin with? This is where I see the system is so damn corrupted to the core. Shouldn't be there. You do one term, 6-year term, that's it. You don't stay there for 30 years. Why? That's what's wrong with our system. Because those people are not serving people. So and again, nothing against Israel, the Jewish people, nothing against that. But again, what is our interest for sending our money and all that for? Same arguments can be made about Ukraine. So yeah, they will undermine it because they are under the influence of the lobbyists. And the president, that's why I said, president of the United States is useless. Straightforward. All right, let me go back up, guys, and see if, here's a question from Boone. I see a question here. You said the Arabs and Turkey speaks but don't act. Why is it so? Why do you think constrain their hands? A great question, Boone. It's because the concern has always been about power, survival. That's all it was all about. I mean, you look at even for the Arab political system. Whoever gets in power stays there forever, and his son will end up taking over. Since when? I understand in monarchy you will say, well, it's a heredity. Come on, man. It's kind of ridiculous. But again, that's because they will be more concerned about the survival of the power or maintaining power than, if the Arabs could get together, you don't need to fight. We're not talking about fighting here. You have certain tools you could use to really reverse this outcome in no time. But the question, do they have the courage and determination and the willpower to do so? And the answer is no. That's the reality of it, Boone. Since I was a kid, my dad used to talk to me about all this, and I kind of like, whatever. As a kid, you're not gonna pay attention. And I wish the man was alive today just to have a conversation with and say thank you. I never said thank you. So for the discipline that is, my dad was kind of a strict type. So, but for my own good, and I'm very grateful. All right, let me see another question. Lizad, what did you think of the interview of Iran's prime minister's advisors? I have not listened to it, so I can't comment on something I haven't. I have to listen to it. And what I am paying attention now is these developments of the U.S. destroyer shut down one of the missiles from the Houthis. Now that I need to check on it to understand the dynamics of it and see where that happens. So. All right, let me. I'm gonna have to go back up, guys, quickly here and see. I will be working on the other story for. I didn't forget about the new Argentinian president. Yeah. This kind of doesn't make sense. Question: Chinese motives to muddy the water as to their role as an honest power broker. I don't quite understand the question. The question is not structured right, so I can't comment on something. Sorry. And even though it doesn't sound like someone is writing that question. So funny how you learn what to look for in writing. David Musso. David, please address the importance of U.S. relations with the Philippines and the locations and the geography of the 7,000 plus island. Hint, military importance. Okay. I did few videos on this recently. I don't know if you had a chance to watch them. Just check them out first. Then we can do an update on that one. You are absolutely correct. That's all I can say about this one here. Harvard is also one of the primary recruitment pools for U.S. alphabet agency. You're absolutely correct. It's very, very different. Very, very, very different here in the U.S. And because tell people, that's why I consider you guys on a different level. I mean, none of us is better than others. That's not what I'm saying here. It's just intellectually, I consider you on a different level because you have now acquired the basic understanding of how to read a report of, Horace Lim, good to see you, man. Truly, Horace has been one of the supporters behind the scenes, guys. It's been there. So I had a tear in my eye when Iran Saudi Arabia resumed diplomatic relations. The Sunni and Shia has been fighting since 656 AD. I concur to that. At the Battle of Camel. Yeah, during, especially after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, and it became the ascendancy to power, it became a nightmare. That's how long, and yet China was able to put that aside and focus on what's objective. And both countries came to an agreement because of that. Not because China aligned with this or aligned with that. Not because China gave investment to this no. So in the idea of the Arab-Israeli conflict is going to be a little bit challenging. So, but fingers crossed. We're always going to have to keep hope someone will do the right thing. And could it be China's turn this time around? Because we've seen how things have been all these years. So that's how I see it. That's how I see it. Oh, AC Lee, another supporter, been an avid supporter. Thank you so much, man. I can't thank you enough for your super sticker. Truly appreciate it. Truly appreciate it. And once again, to those who bought me coffee, I really, really appreciate it. It means a lot. Here is it, guys. Here's the link. If you ever want to support this channel, as I always say, I do spend a lot of time researching the information for you, because what I wanted to provide you with is not what Western media is repeating. I ain't gonna do that. I'm not gonna waste my time for that. I will not do it. All right, guys. I hope you find this video informative. I have an interview in Washington, so I have to get ready for it soon here. I hope wishing you a good day on this December 4th, and I look forward to seeing you soon. So I'll prepare another topic for you, and we will convert later on. We will converse rather later on. So as always, remember, geopolitics impact your daily life in more ways than one. Till next time, guys. Bye-bye.